Hey guys, we are back updating the Power Rankings for Survivor 46 following episode 8, and this was a pretty fun episode. A lot of fun content here, a lot of great character stuff, and a pretty good tribal to boot, so can't complain too much about this, but we had 10 people to talk about, and that's wasting no more time. Let's get right into the video. So starting off at number 10, we have the boot for this week, and here we have Tevin, and I'm a little surprised Tevin was booted this early. Now, truth be told, I had already written him off, considering he had dropped from last week's placement, and even before that, I had some serious doubts over Tevin's actual win equity based off his edit, but even so, I didn't come into the episode expecting him to be the boot, as one, a lot of his boot was peddled by Liz, who obviously has not been getting the best edit in the world. I wasn't expecting her to get her way there, and also some other factors concerning Q and Venus that we'll get to soon enough, to where I thought those people were more likely to be boots coming into this episode. But obviously we do lose Tevin here, who ends up taking a lot of credit for the soda move from last round, where obviously he was a big factor behind that, even though he didn't actually vote for Venus. And I think from a gain standpoint, a lot of his boot comes down to his lack of threat management, where him pulling off the soda move was such a big factor in why he was such a big threat. And also the fact that he was this bigger than life personality, to where he kind of reminds me of Caleb from 45, someone who just inherently will come off as a pretty big threat considering their charisma. And obviously that leads to him being voted out here. And again, I feel like Tevin played an okay game for the most part. Now, I do have to fault him for taking out Soda as early as he did, considering Soda did seem a bit more willing to work with him moving forward. I feel like he would have been better off taking out Venus instead, someone who was less willing to work with him. And even beyond that, the fact that he wasn't able to hold on to Liz, who was someone he was working with for a lot of the game, is pretty bad there. And the fact that Liz takes him out in a spot where it doesn't even benefit her that much to do so is also a big knock. So again, I'm not saying he played the greatest game in the world, but he's definitely the best game of the boots so far, and we'll get to that when we get to the actual player ranking at the end of the season. But obviously he is now out of the game to where he's here at number 10. And before we continue, I am once again partnering up with Russell Muscle TV to promote Idle Plays. Idle Plays is an online shop where you can purchase Survivor puzzles and practice them. That way you can potentially be the next challenge beast on Survivor 47 and beyond. In this season, we have creator lockers. These are special bundles handpicked by myself and other Survivor YouTubers, along with creator trading cards. If you purchase my puzzle, you can get your hands on the Labyrinth Ball puzzle, the Slide puzzle, and Spencer's puzzle from Survivor Cambodia. If you want to take home these puzzles and more, feel free to use my link in the description or use my affiliate code, Survivor Gumball, and start prepping now. And with that, there are 9 people left in the game to talk about, and as usual, I'll be ranking them based on how likely I think they are to win the game based on their edit and current game position. But at number 9, the person I believe is the least likely to win from this point on is Q. And I think this episode really solidified just how great of a character Q is. Just seeing how hard he's playing and how much he overthinks things and how overconfident he is. I mean, he was the star of this episode, and a big reason why this episode was as entertaining as he was, just considering all the insane decisions that he's making and all of his thoughts on the game going through the episode. Like, you have him orchestrating this game of hide and seek and thinking that's somehow a basis to which assess people's games. You have him going after Tiffany, his own closest ally, because they disagreed over who to vote out next. And you also have him talking about how it's old school Survivor to drag goats to the end, all while he's insisting on people to remain loyal to him, and he's trying to be like this Boston Rob-like figure. I mean, there's just a lot of great moments there, not to mention the actual tribal where he asks people to vote him out, tries to quit the game, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense for him to do so, but it led to the tribal being as chaotic as it was. Again, Q is a great character. Zero shot of winning, however. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that the edit is dunking on him. We're not supposed to be taking him that seriously in the grand scheme of things. And considering just how much content he got in this episode, and really the episodes before that, I felt like there was a solid shot that this was going to be his downfall episode, that this was going to be him overplaying and it would have caused the alliance to fall apart, causing him to be sent out there. But instead, he stays for another round, and truth be told, it wouldn't shock me if he's out in the next couple of rounds anyway, as I feel like there's no way this guy gets close to the end. I feel like he's been primed for a downfall for a while now. So again, I feel like throughout a lot of the season, I didn't really think he had much of a shot at winning, but I'm glad he's still here. I mean, he could potentially provide more entertainment next week, continue to talk about playing the Q game and getting other people to get on board. but obviously he's not winning at this point, which is why he's here at number 9. Now moving on to number 8, and we have another person who I did suspect of being the boot at one point coming into it, but they weren't, and here we have Venus. Now, truth be told, a lot of my suspicion came from out of the show stuff, where Venus herself had posted this tweet on the day of the episode airing, where she talked about how she wasn't going to watch the episode. And obviously, Venus has been pretty active online in vocalizing her complaints about the season. So for her to say that she wasn't watching the episode made me think that something really bad was going to happen to her, like her being voted out or really getting put on blast. But instead, nothing too bad happened, where really the only thing you can kind of point to is when she tries to break up the conversation before Tribal, only for Liz to call her out there. But really, compared to the other stuff that we've seen from Venus so far, it's not that bad in the grand scheme of things. So I'm not entirely sure why she posted that tweet to begin with. But obviously, Venus is not winning at this point. I think this episode just continued to solidify that she's just not gelling with this cast. She's kind of bad socially. And from a pure game standpoint, I just don't see how she wins if she gets towards the end. We're even on the show itself, we're seeing people actively talking about not liking her and wondering why they can't just vote her out instead. And I think this episode made it more likely that she's going to get dragged towards the end and lose in a jury vote that way, which would explain a lot of the content she's gotten up to this point, especially in her premiere. But really, I think this episode did more to sink Venus' ship to where we saw her trying to take credit for the soda move, thinking it was her move, only for her to be contradicted there. Again, also people talking about not liking her and considering all the factors about her game and the way that she talks to people. I just don't see how she wins the game. And that's a big reason I have her here at number 8. Now moving on to number 7, and we have the person I had at the bottom of last week's ranking, but they are a couple spots higher now, and here we have Liz. And this was kind of a breakout episode for Liz here, where she does kind of get the ball rolling on the Tevin blindside, which from a pure game standpoint doesn't really benefit her that much, where I feel like Final 10 is way too early to be making a shot like this, especially for someone like Tevin, who you know will be a big threat down the road, and is someone that she has a better relationship with compared to other people. So I do feel like she made this move a bit too early. And even with her getting all this content, I feel like other people got more content than her. People like Q, for instance, people like Charlie even, with Charlie in particular talking about how he's in the middle. So even then, I feel like other people kind of steal her spotlight. And considering how Dodo her edit has been for a lot of the season, I actually thought for a lot of the episode that this plan wasn't going to work, that it was either just going to lead to nothing or it was going to lead to Liz being randomly booted here, which is kind of insane. But obviously she does get her way here, which again is a minor pro. It's a big reason why I have her above Q and Venus, but really it's too little too late. I just don't see how Liz wins from an edit standpoint. And even from a game standpoint, I just don't see how she wins a jury vote considering how little of a threat she is. Not to mention that she seems pretty well off with all her businesses that she's been telling people to her. I can't really see people wanting to give her the money anyway. So really, I just don't see how Liz wins the game. But the fact that she technically had a better episode here compared to Q and Venus was enough to have her here at number 7. Now moving on to number 6, and we had the same person I had here last week, and here we have Tiffany. And obviously Tiffany was kind of in danger here, where Q wanted to turn on her, which is pretty insane considering that Q was pretty close to her compared to other people. And the fact that it all stemmed from Tiffany not wanting to vote out Venus is kind of wonky there and really speaks to how insane Q is as a player. But at the same time, I just don't think this was that great of an episode for Tiffany either. She's kind of just there. I feel like she doesn't really do anything to repel her edit per se. And granted, I don't think she was in that much danger anyway by the end of it, to where it seemed like the target was always going to be on Tevin anyway. I just don't see how Tiffany wins the game. Again, I feel like she's probably just going to be taken out between 8th place and 6th place, if I had to guess. So really, this episode didn't really do much to change my view on her. I still think she's in it for a bit, but I just don't see how she wins at this point, which is why she's here at number 6. Now moving on to number 5, and we have another person staying in the same spot as last week, and here we have Maria. And Maria is also kind of just there in the edit, where she doesn't really do anything to propel her edit, where the only confessional she gets is talking about how Q doesn't want anyone wavering, and that if you can show that you're loyal to him, that you're good with Q. And really, I think that's kind of a sinking ship, where it feels like Q is kind of on his way out regardless. So again, nothing really good there. Now, I think a slight positive to Maria is the fact that Charlie keeps talking about their relationship, that they really are making this important relationship, where Charlie talks about how him and Maria are once again the middle and that they're the ones making the decisions there. But even so, I feel like Charlie is getting all the content for that, and we're not really seeing Maria and Charlie checking in much in this episode, which I do worry about that. And even if it was more of a focus, the fact that Charlie is getting the bulk of the content for that duo is probably not a good sign for Maria anyway. And really, the main reason I have Maria above Tiffany is I feel like Maria is a bit more primed to get towards the end of the game compared to Tiffany, where I feel like Tiffany's pretty doomed to be booted before the end. I can at least see a world where Maria gets towards the end, but not in a winning position. But still, the fact that Charlie continues to talk about his relationship with her was enough to have Maria here number 5. Now moving on to number 4, and believe it or not, we have another person in the same spot as they were last week, and here we have Hunter. And I feel like this episode further cemented that Hunter's probably not winning the season, as this was another pretty underwhelming episode for him, where he doesn't get a confessional until after he wins the immunity challenge, where he talks about wanting to target Tiffany, only for him to not get his way there. And really, he was mostly going to be on the outs here, considering that this relationship with him and Teffin was going to be severed here. Now, I think one thing you can point to is that this could have been like a way of protecting Hunter from a bad thing happening to his game, considering that he was close to Tevin and the fact that he loses him here is not particularly great. So I guess you can say that his lack of content was him like trying to be shielded, but considering that his last episode was also not particularly great, where he was in direct danger and could have had this opportunity to prop himself up, only for him to not really get that, is a pretty bad sign for him. And plus, from a pure game standpoint, this is obviously a bad spot for his game. And also with him starting to win challenges, I could see him becoming a target because of that. So really, I've kind of gotten off the Hunter train at this point, and I feel like I'm higher on other people, which is why I do have him here at number 4. Now moving on to number 3, and this person has moved down compared to last week, but number 3 we do have Ben. And this was another mostly disappointing episode for Ben, where his only confessional comes at the beginning, where he talks about losing Tim, which is a confessional that felt like it had to be there. And even beyond that, he's only really seen during the scramble, but even then is a minor player in that. So really, I'm just not feeling that great about Ben at this point, and I feel like with another person moving up in particular, I did have to bump him down to number 3. Now moving on to number 2, and I feel like this person is pretty solidly at number 2 at this point. I feel like this person is clearly a main character on the season, but someone who I don't think will win by the end of it, and that person is Charlie. And this was a pretty good episode for Charlie. He obviously gets a lot of game talk with him navigating his relationship with Q. Even beyond that, once again talks about being in the middle and how he's the one that went wrong with the Journey Alliance, kind of foreshadowing that. He obviously does get his way in taking out Tevin, talking about how Tevin was a better move for his game. So again, a lot of great stuff for Charlie here. And I think at this point, it's pretty clear that he's the narrator of the season, how he's sort of walking the audience through a lot of the action across the season, which is a good spot to be in. However, I don't think it's necessarily a winning spot, where I don't think being the narrator of the season is necessarily a sign you're going to win, as I feel like it could just as easily fall into this trap of him being a big character, and it could just fall into this trap of being the Jesse of the season, or the Omer, or even the Drew of being this final boss to be taken out towards the tail end of things. So again, I don't think Charlie's going to win, but compared to a lot of the other people, I feel like he is a decent edit and definitely one of the frontrunners to win. But I feel like the number 1 person is more of a frontrunner at this point, which is why he's here at number 2. And now, at number 1, the person I believe is the most likely to win Survivor 46 at this point is Kenzie. And I think at this point, Kenzie is the frontrunner by a lot, where this was a pretty good episode for her, where despite her not getting that much content, I feel like that addresses a complaint that people have had with Kenzie's edit, how she's been overexposed and how she has been getting too much content. So I do think this is a necessary cooldown episode for her, but at the same time, she's not entirely invisible either, where she still gets 2 confessionals in the episode, and one of them being during the scramble, where she does talk about why voting out Tevin is a good move, talking about how Tevin's this big threat and that he's got to go. And this confessional felt pretty unnecessary, considering that she didn't really have much to do with the actual vote, how she wasn't part of this Journey Alliance. So for her to still get that confessional talking about voting out Tevin, only to then do so, and her talking about why it's good for her game, indicates that the show is going out of its way to highlight Kenzie, to show her perspective, even when it's not necessary, which I think is a very good sign in terms of her overall chances. And I feel like with all the hesitations that I have with other people, I think at this point, Kenzie is the pretty clear frontrunner, which is pretty crazy to think considering how low I was on her after episode 2. But I feel like she has really rebounded, and I feel like at this point, she's probably by far the frontrunner to win, which is why she's here number 1. And there we go, that'll do it for this week's video. If you like this content, be sure to like and subscribe, really helps out the channel. Now I'll be back again next week to update the Power Rankings again, so you can forward to that. I'm covering other shows right now, including The Amazing Race 36, Big Brother Canada 12, and The Circle Season 6, so you can expect weekly power rankings of those shows. I'm on Patreon, so if you want to consider supporting the channel, you can do so by clicking the link in the description, and you can also join the Discord server by also clicking the link in the description. There's a lot of stuff coming your way, but for now, that is the video. See ya.